Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Welcome to this series where we're exploring kindergarten through grade 8. Today we're talking about 5th grade and the 11-year-old child. This is one of my favorite years in all of elementary school. So what is going on with the 11-year-old child? Well, emotionally, they're in a really good place, and physically, they're in a really good place as well. The 11-year-old child is in their what is called the golden age of childhood, and truly is this golden age. It's post 9-year change, which is quite tumultuous. And if you want to know more about the 9-year change, I encourage you to check out the grade 3 video and blog post that is linked in the description box below. And the 11-year-old child is before the tumultuous puberty years. Now, by 11, certainly some children have already hit puberty, but in these 7-year cycles, we're looking at 14 being this marker for puberty where the majority of students will have hit puberty. Of course, there may be some who haven't, but at least by 14, we're looking at this tremendous milestone from childhood to adulthood. So the 11-year-old child is in this in-between phase where things are really good, physically, emotionally, mentally as well. So what is happening emotionally for this 11-year-old child? At 11, the 5th grader is in a period of time where they appreciate perfection and beauty. They are seeking perfection and beauty in the world around them. And that is why the lessons of botany and geometry and even the ancient civilizations are brought for the student at this time. So the 11-year-old has already gone through that tumultuous 9-year change. And in that time, there was a lot of maybe discord emotionally. There was some anxiety potentially. And by 10, those things settled down and there was this new sense of confidence and I am here in the world. And at 11 now, the limbs have stretched out, but they're not quite elongated like the way that's going to be in the coming years as they enter more into puberty, where their limbs are going to get very long, they might get a little bit discoordinated. And so 11 is like this perfect balance where they're in their body, they know their body, it's before their body just starts to stretch and grow very quickly for puberty. And before the emotions start to get a little bit unraveled with puberty. And so emotionally, they're quite stable. And this is a time where geometry especially is of interest for that 5th grader. And it's going to be revisited in 6th grade as well. But here is like this perfection in math, this beautiful harmony that is exhibited in these geometric forms. And so geometry in grade 5 is really different than what you would expect in a traditional approach to geometry in middle school. So in middle school, you might have geometry where there are a lot of proofs and theorems. That is not the introduction of geometry for the grade 5 student. It's very beautiful. It is constructing these geometric figures and exploring the beauty within that, beginning with the circle. And one of the very first divisions of a circle is 6th division of a circle, which is the easiest of all of the divisions of a circle. And then we're going to move from that into other divisions. But grade 5 primarily focuses on that because within that, there's so much that you can do just doing 6th division of a circle. And so geometry is going to be the highlight for the math main lesson block. Now, it doesn't mean that that's the only math that's going to be done. The students are going to continue to become more proficient in the math that they have previously done. So last year and the year before, they were introduced to fractions and hopefully decimals and percents. And so this year will be a year of really honing those skills, practicing, becoming proficient, and hopefully mastering them. And it will take a few years to really master fractions, decimals, and percents, and to master the 4 mathematical operations with fractions. And so it's going to take a little bit of time, but you have a couple of years to really practice that before you move into pre-algebra or algebra. And so those lessons, those math lessons, are actually daily proficiency lessons versus the main lesson block, which is a period of time of about 3 to 4 weeks. And you might need 2 main lesson blocks in one subject area to really complete that entire subject area within the year. But primarily you're doing about 3 to 4 weeks in a particular subject area. That's for your main lesson, 2 hours every day, focused on that subject area before you move on to another subject area. But simultaneously, every day there is some math practice and there is some language arts practice if it's necessary, or some time at least in order to complete some main lesson work that maybe needs a little bit more attention, maybe a little bit more attention to spelling or grammar. Okay, so we have our beautiful math representation in geometry. Where else can you see this beauty? If an astronomy block is being done in grade 5, then we're looking at the geometry of the sky, which is a beautiful way to describe what's going on visibly for the student. So astronomy is delivered very differently than what you would expect an astronomy unit study or an astronomy block in a traditional sense. So astronomy is divided up into 2 portions. The first block is on the constellations in the sky, and this works beautifully with the ancient Greek and ancient Roman main lesson block. And so if I were dividing this up, I might consider doing the astronomy a little bit later in the year so that we could have already done our geometry main lesson block, and that we could have already done our Greek and Roman main lesson block. And of course, if you flip it around and do it the other way, then when you're doing your Greek and Roman main lesson block, you can refer back to your astronomy. But I would prefer to do it the other way around. And in some cases, I've had families who say they do astronomy in the winter because it makes it easier for them to go out and see the night sky. I tend to like to do our sciences in the spring, and I prefer to do our math main lesson block in the fall, and then we like to do our history in the winter. But that's just a personal preference. Okay, so geometry of the sky, astronomy, is first the constellations, and that's the first portion of the main lesson block. And so all of the stories of the constellations and even drawing the different constellations are done in that first portion. And there's a special main lesson block for that as well. It is a main lesson, not a main lesson block, a main lesson book. The main lesson book is blue pages with white pages, and you can use a white chalk, and then you can spray the page once you're done. But you can use a white chalk in order to create your constellations, and then you can do your written portion on the blank pages. And then don't forget to seal those pages if you're using chalk. And that's a really beautiful way to show all of the different constellations for your astronomy main lesson block. The second half of the astronomy main lesson block includes the geometry of the sky, which is really beautiful. And so we're looking at the different astronomers of the past. So there's Tycho Brahe, there's Galileo, there's Kepler, and there's Copernicus. And so these are some of the ones that are going to be talked about in the second part of this astronomy main lesson block. Additionally, we're looking at the 3 laws of motion of Kepler. And so again, all of the astronomy that you're going to be studying is observable astronomy. So we're not going to be talking about the different planets and their composition or their the time it takes for each of those planets to get around the sun. We're only going to be looking at what's observable in the night sky for the student. And so in that, we can see retrograde motion, we can understand the elliptical motion of the planets. And of course, we can observe the sun and the stars and the moon. And so that's what makes up the majority of the content for the astronomy main lesson block. Some of the other main lesson blocks you're going to have for the grade 5 year are history main lesson blocks, and they're going to be very extensive. And they're going to be the ancient civilizations. They're going to be the ancient civilizations up until ancient Greek, and that transition into ancient Greek, ancient Rome will be where history really takes a turn. And that's going to be in grade 6, where you'll have an ancient Roman main lesson block in grade 5, where it talks about basically the mythology, and that works really well with the first portion of the astronomy main lesson block. And then in grade 6, you're going to have a Roman main lesson block that's Roman history, and the different emperors of Rome, and then it moves into the Middle Ages. And so that kind of history will be saved for grade 6. But the ancient civilizations and all of the mythologies and the creation stories, that's going to be reserved for grade 5. And there are a lot. And so there are many more history main lesson blocks in grade 5 than I think in any of the other years. You have ancient Rome, ancient Greece, ancient India, ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India and Persia as well. And if you decide to go into ancient China or into the ancient civilizations of South America, you could also choose this time to explore those as well. And so this is a really packed year for history, which means that some of the other main lesson blocks, like the science main lesson block of botany, is you're only going to have one botany main lesson block, one astronomy, whereas in other years you may have more sciences, or in previous years you may have more time dedicated to building the basic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic. This year is all about history. So the ancient civilizations are going to be presented so that you are learning about the beliefs, the creation story, the mythologies, very little with the written history in this, or recorded history, in the sense that we will learn about some historical figures, but primarily we're looking at the culture and the civilization of these ancient historical civilizations, rather than the history blocks that will follow, which will have a lot more historical events, let's say, that are occurring and that are really playing into the trajectory that gets us to modern history. Some of the other main lesson blocks that you can expect in grade 5, in addition to the language arts, are the specialty subjects of eurythmy, foreign language, music, and handwork. And handwork is one of my favorite additional main or subject areas. And these subject areas are usually maybe twice a week. They're smaller classes, or smaller lessons rather. So instead of the main lesson, which is 2 hours, these lessons are maybe an hour long, or 45 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes. It kind of depends. And as a homeschooler, we were able to include that however we chose throughout the year, but I found that we ended up doing a lot of our handwork more in the winter time. And this sort of coordinated with our history blocks that we would also do in the winter. So we would do our history blocks in the winter, which included a lot more read alouds or presenting oral lessons. And there was less work compared to other main lesson blocks. There was a lot more listening. There might be hands-on projects and then some written work, but it was more, we could cozy up and just read for hours. And in that time, my students, or even myself, if sometimes we got to a point where the students wanted to read aloud, we could be working on our handwork. And so any knitting or weaving, we could be doing that while we are listening. That was just a great way to bring sort of a cozy environment to our winter main lesson blocks. Now, doing it this way was a personal decision. I had learned it from another homeschooler years ago, that she divided up her year according to the seasons with different main lesson blocks, or really different subject areas that were focused on throughout the year. And I really liked that quite a bit, and I found that it really matched our home environment as well. And so we ended up doing it. And so we would typically start the school year with our main lesson block in math or grammar. And for us, that allowed us to practice those skills throughout the year. Now, I talked to some other teachers who actually chose to do it almost the opposite. And the reasons why were very interesting and actually made a lot of sense for their particular classroom environment. But because we tend to start definitely by 7, almost 8, my students are quite old for their grade level, which means they're really capable of taking on some of the skills that younger students may struggle a little bit more with. And so while it made sense and it was relevant for us to start with those skills at the beginning of the year, those new skills at the beginning of the year when the students were fresh off of summer vacation, and we almost always took a summer vacation. So a good 2 to 3 months to just really not do any school, to almost forget everything, and then kind of come back to it with vigor and excitement and just readiness. And so we would do our new skill-based learning in the fall. And this was always my goal. It didn't always turn out this way, but this was always my intention. What ended up almost always happening was that because we do our science in the spring, we always had one main lesson block that sort of carried over from the previous year that we would include in the fall. And so we would have like one science block and then a math block, and then we would quickly get into our history blocks. And our language arts blocks usually got absorbed into the history blocks with the new skills that we were learning that way. And in this way, we found that it worked really well so that the students could practice those skills, especially those math skills, throughout the year. Whereas in some brick and mortar schools, some of the students might be a little bit young or they're not quite ready for those new math skills. And so teachers will choose to do that at the end of the year so that those students have a good 6 to 7 months to just grow and mature and become really confident in the math skills that were introduced in the previous year, so that they're finally ready for that new math learning that comes a little bit later in the school year. One of my favorite subjects for grade 5 is the botany main lesson block. Now, in our homeschool, there have been some main lesson blocks that we never forget to do, and botany is one of them. We might overlook some of the other main lesson blocks or combine them with other main lesson blocks depending on where they fall within the year with my 4 children, but botany was one that we definitely did. I loved it so much. Now, the botany main lesson block goes through lessons that maybe don't make sense at first glance because we are looking at fungus, mushrooms being introduced as part of the botany main lesson block. And as we know, fungus or mushrooms are part of their own distinction and not really part of the plant kingdom, but they are necessary in understanding how plants were able to evolve from very simple plants, algae and lichen, all the way up into flowering plants. And so the way that the lessons are done, once again, beginning with the whole and then moving to the parts. And so the first lesson in botany is to look at the complete plant, from root to stem to flower to fruit. And so that you have this beautiful example of the complete plant. And then starting in lesson 2, we're looking at different aspects of the plant. And so we're looking at the most basic plants, so like algae, and then into lichen and fungus and the importance of mushrooms within this whole trajectory of evolution. And then moving into the ferns and conifers before getting into trees and flowering plants and fruits and the grasses, etc. What I like about this is that it takes you through almost a history of the plants up until the most advanced complete plant. And of course, going through a botany main lesson block invites so many opportunities for hands-on projects. It's one of those ones where even if you dedicate 3 or 4 weeks, even 2 main lesson blocks of 3 or 4 weeks, it always for us took far longer because it was such a great opportunity to either plant our own garden or to visit botanical gardens or to just try out new fruits and vegetables at a local farmer's market. All of these things really bring these lessons to life, and I find that whenever we can introduce food or an element of eating into our main lesson block, my children love it so much. And so it's especially easy to do in a history main lesson block. We have definitely done that in the past, either doing historical meals or cultural meals. But whenever it's possible to introduce an element of food or eating, or just heading to the kitchen for any kind of cooking, or to the backyard or to the garden or to the yard in order to do any kind of yard work or planting, I find that my children really respond well to it. It is memorable and it is educational. So once again, for the botany main lesson block, there are so many opportunities to include some hands-on projects. I do have an entire botany playlist if you are interested. It is linked below, so you can see some of the projects that we did for our botany main lesson block. So one of my absolute favorites, we will never miss an opportunity to do a botany main lesson block, and oftentimes we may not do a complete botany main lesson block. We may do a botany unit study, and there are many differences in doing a unit study that's a botany inspired unit study versus a botany main lesson block. And so whatever suits your family, I highly encourage you to include that whenever possible. I hope that you enjoyed this look at the golden age of childhood, the 5th grade and the 11-year-old child. I encourage you to check out the blog post that accompanies this video. It's for the grade 5 student. It's on my website at pepperandpine.com. You can find that link in the description box below. I go into far more detail about the 11-year-old child and what you can expect in that year. So I highly encourage you to check it out. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on my website at Pepper and Pine.